Thank you very much. Yeah, let's have a quick prayer. Thank you, Father, for this good day and for your wonderful words, which give us hope and confidence, and for the beauty of them, and for your promises that you always keep. We thank you for all these things, Father. Help me today to deliver this in a meaningful way, so it will be remembered and shared. Amen. Oh, man. The topic is children's stories for adults only, and I wanted to just take a different approach to things. We all know it, it's the stories, they've been told, we've heard them 50 times. The stories we were taught as children, they were presented in a way that was developed and they were suitable for youthful minds, right? They were about famous people from Israel's past, Israel's heroic past. And they were usually presented as standalone events. They're still seen that way. They're isolated in time, most of the time, with no connection to anything else in the Bible. Usually adults don't go back to them. But I wanted to show this with a different perspective, because I think they are a little bit neglected. These stories, I think, are connected to other portions of the Bible, but there are age limits to understanding all of it. And some of this might be a little controversial to some people, but that's just the way I am. The first one that I want to talk about is Noah's Ark. And by the way, this will only take about 25 minutes. We're going to do an abbreviated version because we started late. It's Noah's Ark. The Ark was like a rectangular barge. It had to be a practical vessel and huge with multiple decks because it was holding a lot. There were a lot of creatures coming. Genesis 6:15 states that it was 300 by 50 by 30 cubits, which is 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall. And that is using the most conservative value for an ancient cubit. From what I understand, there were at least two sizes. The most conservative value is 1.5 feet. Using strong wood and with those dimensions, that gives you a vessel with a water displacement of about 24,000 tons and an internal volume of 1.4 million cubic feet. Okay, that's fine. That's the same capacity as 522 standard railroad boxcars. This thing was huge, okay? Those numbers give you a ratio of 5 to 3 in its size. If you look at that thing, okay, Mom and I don't have that ratio here, but picture. This is 475 feet long, okay? If you looked at it on end, it would really look like this, a ratio of 5 to 3. Maritime people, maritime engineers will tell you that's a very stable structure, even with multiple decks, and that could survive in turbulent waters a listing of 45 degrees, fully loaded and recover to the horizontal. The ark was well designed, it had to survive, because it was basically a life preserver for the righteous. Okay? Moses gives us a timeline of events for the flood. He uses specific days and numbered months. I think it starts in Genesis 7, goes through 9. He tells us that the ark set down on the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month. He's going along telling us all these events. He puts all these particular little events in there and he dates them. I don't know why. At least I didn't before. There seems to have been a calendar in place. A calendar in place during the time of the flood and before. At least that's my conjecture. If there was, and some of the Jewish sages say that there was, because they say that the first day of the year, the first year, was the creation of Adam. According to sages quoted out of the First Fruits of Zion organization, which I found that fascinating. It's not unreasonable, I think, that our Creator would include a calendar if he is a God of order and reason, and not chaos and confusion. Because he invented time, he can do what he wants with it. Why be concerned about a calendar? Or for the day the ark came to rest? You certainly can't form doctrine on that. It's just an event. But I don't think God puts these details in there just to fill up pages. Let's take a look at when Israel was freed from slavery in Egypt. God tells Moses in Exodus 12:2 that the month of Passover is to be the month that starts the year, okay? It's a big change. And that was Abib at the time. In fact, I think that's the only name in Genesis that's used for a month. It became Nisan later for other reasons. But all of a sudden you've got two calendars. Okay? And they're offset from each other.
Only one is God's.
Yeah. Here we go. Got that. Okay, one more.
I've got a DVD about God's time.
Okay. Then you can show it to me. God tells Moses in Exodus 12:2 that the month of Passover is to be the first month that starts the year now. The new beginning is going to be in the spring now instead of the fall season, according to what he's saying. The two calendars are offset. Now, the 14th of that month of Abib will be to the people a memorial, the day that death passed over in the first month of history for the new nation of Israel. Let's jump forward from that time, again, another 1400 years. Yeshua comes to Jerusalem for the fifth and last time in his ministry, and it's the month of Pesach, Nisan. He is executed, buried, and removed alive after 3 days from the grave. The day that death has been passed over now is a unique anniversary. It's the 17th day of the 7th month in the old civil calendar. It's the same day. It is the day of new beginnings, with the ark resting down and Messiah rising up. Okay? This is the day of new beginnings for those who are obedient, okay, and righteous in our Father's eyes. If we look carefully at that, we'll see that there are 3 anniversaries, 3 beginnings, in the confluence of these 2 offset calendars. Okay? Did you get one? Yeah, okay.
Is there any more?
No, I only had 7, I'm sorry.
Here, they can have.
Just take.
Share this one. Here, you can take this one. Oops, because I have an DVD on it.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Really, the first anniversary is the first month in the civil calendar because that's the anniversary of Adam's birth. The month of Nisan is 2 anniversaries. Messiah's resurrection and the day that the ark landed on the mountain. Time of new beginnings. Here's an ark side note. In Genesis 11, 1 and 2, it says that the whole of earth was one speech. And as they journeyed from the east, they settled in the plain of Shinar. Okay? I think most of us have all read that. I'll put something up here real quick. Bear with me, my artistic abilities are limited. Okay, we're gonna rough this out. Here is the black, this is Turkey, modern day Turkey. Here's the Black Sea. Down here we have Sinai, Saudi Arabia, Israel, okay? Over here in this general area, coming up to the Persian Gulf, are the 2 major rivers of the area, the Euphrates and Tigris. This is the Euphrates River. Here is Babylon. This is the land of Shinar, right? Okay, Saudi Arabia. Okay. It says in 11, Genesis 11, that the ark landed, after the ark landed, that the people who were the descendants of Noah moved from east of Shinar, which is southern Iraq, and they landed on a mountain, singular. Plural, the mountains, I should say, of Ararat. That's a problem with that. Ararat is up here. Shinar is here. In fact, Shinar and Babylon are almost directly north and south of each other. If you left the ark and went east, or from the east and you went west, you head into the Mediterranean. You'd have to go south to the land of Shinar. Are we looking in the wrong place for the ark? Because what it says in the Bible is it's over here. This is where Ararat is. It's the only way you can come from the east and get to Shinar. They're looking in the wrong place. I think.
How come they saw it? They said they did.
What?
How come some people said they went there and they saw it and they took pictures?
Well, I didn't see the pictures. I won the lottery too, nobody believes me. I think we're looking in the wrong place. There's a story, a tradition about Marco Polo returning from the Orient, naming Ararat in Turkey, for who knows what reason. Okay, the second one is Daniel and the Lion's Den. Okay, when we look at Daniel's situation, I think it might be a hint of what will befall the Messiah. I saw parallels between the two stories. So in Daniel's case, I made a list of things that seem to compare with some of the things that are in the Gospels. In both stories, we can see the following. Number one, the Jewish people were dominated by pagan nations, Babylon and then Rome. Number two, religious leaders with limited authority conspired to eliminate someone they envied. In Daniel 6, King Darius wants to appoint a ruler over all of them in Babylon, and Daniel seemed to be the obvious choice for the job. The princes clearly did not want a Hebrew immigrant slave to be over them. Later, the Sanhedrin would conspire to stop Yeshua because the whole world is following him. Both accused appeared to be moving towards positions of leadership. 3. Scripture says that both accused possessed an excellent spirit in Mark 1 and Daniel 6. 4. The leaders in both stories appealed to senior authorities, Darius, King Darius, and Pilate. They appealed to them for judgment and sentencing because they didn't have the power to do it themselves. 5. The laws were corrupted or ignored to ensure arrests and convictions. 6. Darius and Pilate, who were not native to the land that they controlled, did not intend to condemn the accused. 7. Those two were trapped in a legal or political situation, and they were manipulated into capitulating to their subordinates. It's pathetic. 8. The accused did not contest the charges, and they received no help in their defense. 9. The personal conduct of both accused was never considered. 10. In prayer, the accused submitted to the will of the Father. That's in Daniel 6 and John 14. 11. 2 individuals didn't sleep well, King Darius and Pilate's wife. 12. Dishonorable sentences of death were pronounced, and they were brutal, and they were dishonorable. 13. The accused ended up in spaces closed off with stone and legally secured with the seals of King Darius and Pilate so that nobody could get in or out. 14. Angels were present in these spaces and at different times, but with different tasks. And finally, 15. After 1 night and 3 nights, respectively, the ones thought dead were found alive in the morning. I don't believe all these similarities are coincidences. I think there's just too many of them. The next one I've got is Tower of Babel. One of my favorite subjects. When I was a young person, it was difficult for me to believe this stuff. I didn't believe it very much. I couldn't believe that grown men would waste their time putting up something like this when there was so many important things to do, especially in a fairly primitive society, agricultural. Then I started to do a little reading and I found out this thing was real. I learned that the tower site in Iraq has been identified, along with Babylon. I also learned there is significant power when people come together in a unity of purpose. They do great things. Not necessarily moral, but they do great things. Some investigators today actually believe that there was a temple for worship at the top of this tower, which was actually a ziggurat on a square base, not this oval spiral building, this nonsense from that painting in Europe. That's
The one they used to promote the EU.
it's silly, really.
Yeah.
The whole place was a violation of God's instructions. And the babbling was the creation of new languages, which caused them to scatter, new cultures too, from it. There would come a day when different tongues are heard near the true temple of the true God of creation. And this temple had no tower below it. Its foundation was a mountain, a thing not formed by hands. And in the book of Acts, at that true temple of God, the languages were not new. The languages were in place. But each person heard what was said in their own language. This time the Spirit of God provided a gift, and the people were not confused. They were astonished. This was a new teaching and a new experience that would bring people closer. They stayed together at the city of God, not scattered. They were in unity before they returned to their homes. Both events involved languages, but with completely different results. In Babylon, the city of man, people assembled to violate God's instruction, and they were cursed with confusion. In Jerusalem, the city of God, people assembled to honor the receiving of his instruction, at Shavuot, and they were blessed with the Spirit and a new unity of purpose. Since then, the world hasn't been the same. The next one I call Going Up Through Jericho. After crossing the Jordan River, the children of Israel could not possibly have known that they had camped near a city that sat on a spot at the lowest point on the face of the earth. When they were at Jericho, or near it, they had nowhere to go but up, and up into the land that was promised several centuries earlier. Their king, who is the true God of all creation, had them march around the place 13 times in 7 days, effectively mocking a festival of dedication to Jericho's God King. Similar to the plagues that had mocked Egypt's pantheon of gods. On the 7th day there was a loud shout with trumpets. There may be a subtle prophecy in those 7 days around the city, because a day to him is as 1,000 years and vice versa, right? In the 7th millennium of Israel's history, according to Jewish sages, there is to be a shout and a trumpet call. So, in Joshua 6:20, we're told that the walls of Jericho came down and the people went up into the city. The evil place was exposed. Archaeology confirms the use of the word up. A famous archaeologist from Indiana discovered how a portion of the collapsed double wall formed a gravel and dirt ramp straight up into the city. They had their walls like this. It's pretty smart the way they did it sometimes, some of those cities. Here's the plain main revetment wall would sit here. This would be all loose gravel, okay, purposely. And there'd be another one here. If there were any houses out here, that's where the poor people lived. Here was the city, okay? If you busted through this wall, all this gravel came down on you. Then you had to fight your way up into less gravel down here up this wall, while they sat up there and picked you off. It was pretty clever. Anyway, he discovered this ramp of rubble. You think that's how they went straight up easy. When that one-sided battle was over with, the children of Israel would move on, but they were not to rebuild the city of the moon god that sat next to a dead sea. I suspect the whole area stunk to death. These people were, the Israelites were to get away from this culture that had done terrible things to children. They were to go up and away from the city at the bottom of the earth. There is a Hebrew word describing the idea of going up. It is aliyah. And it describes a person leaving their surroundings and ascending to a higher place. A contemporary meaning is our first pilgrimage to Israel. I looked it up. This is the first time in the land for the new nation of Israel. Okay? It was their time to make aliyah by depending on their king who brought that nation through so much. They went through a lot. The first, what was it, about several months, and then 40 years after that. He took them through a place that was the opposite of Jerusalem. In Jericho there was stress and war and sin. In Jerusalem there would be life and peace as long as there was obedience. Aliyah through Jericho was accomplished because that generation of Israel was not encumbered with the memory of Egypt, and they listened to their king and believed his promises. In these various situations and these stories, someone managed to trust the Lord that he would deliver what was needed. They were not able to do it. So pride was put aside, and trust in the power of God became the essential thing. And because of it, they would be able to accomplish great things. They took advantage of the power that was available, something that's rarely done anymore. We're not that different from these folks, but we have a newer message. Yeah. We live with two different but related statements. In John 15:5, which essentially means, without him I can do nothing. In Philippians 4:13, we can do all things through Christ. Talking about things getting done, getting accomplished, doing something. What our Father does through his miracles and his Messiah is suitable for people of all ages. And I think it might be good to go back to these and other children's stories and read them all over again. And that's all I have. Any questions? Any comments?
Very interesting.
Oh. Okay, I thought it was too. I found this stuff from a few people. Some of this I found on my own. Chuck Missler, Perry Stone, two individuals. I got about 40% of this. Any questions?
I wonder why there's no excavations down that hill to see if we could find any
They don't
remnants
live.
of that skull.
They don't live. It's a tradition. I don't know. It might be private property for all I know. I have heard, I don't know if this is true, that there's a bus terminal next to one of the traditional sites of Golgotha. Is that correct?
It's at the base of it, yes.
Yeah. It's half covered up, in other words, the whole area is covered up with a bus terminal.
And it's fenced off, they're restricted to do any excavation. They did for a time, but then the council or whatever, they restrict it, put a fence around it, and they can't touch it anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of like, it's not the same attitude, but I mean, they did the same thing with Mount Sinai. With the Arabs, you can't even come within, what, a couple miles of
Oh,
it.
yeah, it's all fenced on and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's been people up there now.
Oh, yeah. But as far as Golgotha, see, the name never made sense to me. But if it's a condensation of Goliath of Gath, and it's the place of the skull. Where does that come from? That fits with tradition to me. And I think Jewish tradition has a lot of strength to it. It's not just rumors.